What's up, peak performers? Christian here. So let's talk a little bit about procrastination and how it really can destroy your peak performance, especially your sustainable peak performance, which is obviously the thing we want because it makes us successful and we can get what we want in life, no matter in what kind of domain it is. So procrastination has nothing to do with you being lazy of that sort, but it's more have to do with your biology and your biology loop. And I'm going to explain that, and I'm going to take you to the solution and what to do about it right away. But before that, I want you to know that research and studies shows that it's really common that high achievers losing around 2 to 3 hours of deep work due to procrastination each day. And it's a lot of work that is not being done towards your goal or towards your meaningful tasks that really need to be prioritized. That also include that when you procrastinate, you also have a delay of focus where you task switching to one task from another, and you have around 20 to 25 minutes or so until your brain can really refocus after you have switched the task as well. So if we calculate that, we can get as much as 50-60% of the day that is really not going to be effective regards to sustainable peak performance. Procrastination also happens to actually happen in the biology level, in a cellular level, and also can really affect your longevity and your health and your ability to get sick or not. Before I head into the nitty-gritty about what to do about it, which is why you are here, I want you to know that if you do not understand your biology loop and the reason behind the procrastination in you, it's going to be very difficult for you to get any sort of productivity hack or of that sort to actually get that into the system and to be effective. It's not going to work. So with that said, let's dive into the real pain points and also the solution of solving your procrastination for good. If you're watching this, you're probably a high achiever with high standards and good discipline. You probably do not lack ambition and you know what you're capable of. Yet still, it's very hard for you to move the needle sometimes and to get the work done that is the most important for the task in hand and for your goal and for you to achieve the things you want to achieve in life. This is a typical scenario for a high achiever that is procrastinating, which is very common, and there's a reason for that. And it could be your email, your inbox, it could be your phone, it could be other people, and you've just distracted with things and you have a lot of things on your plate and so on and so forth. So what most people in the peak performance world wouldn't or don't admit is that that loop itself, where you're doing stuff that doesn't move the needle, just seems to be very productive, but it's actually making your performance weaker. And it's not a flaw, it's not even your laziness or so, but it's just the brain that is doing exactly what it's supposed to do. It's trying to protect you from fear and from risk taking and all that. And the thing is that if a thing is important for you and really matters, that's gonna be friction. And if it's no friction or resistance there, it most of the time just is another task that isn't that meaningful for your purpose, right? So it's a paradox there where your brain trying to protect you and at the same time you want to do it, but it just inhibit that function. And we're gonna break that cycle and break that loop now, once and forever. So when you face an important task like a pitch or a really important phone call, or it can be a training session or what have you, right? That is carrying really, really heavy weight. The thing is that in the brain, the area called amygdala, which is the fear center, pretty much in biologically speaking, it's there to detect danger, right? So it's there to detect the saber-toothed tiger behind you historically, but right now it's detecting any sort of work or tasks that is carrying a lot of weight for you. All right? So, and in that moment where amygdala and the fear center will be very, very active, the front of the brain, called the prefrontal cortex, is actually not shut down completely, but it's inhibited. It's going in low energy, because now it's time to amplify more of the reptile brain, so to speak. And we do not have to focus or planning or strategical thinking or making some sort of long-term creative thinking of that sort. So this is why it's impossible for some people, or they feel it's impossible to get anything done when the amygdala is active. Okay? And if we explain that more of a biological sense, the stress hormone cortisol is increased in the brain, and the chemical dopamine, which is connected to pleasure and to be attending and participation chemical, is lowering down. So this is the state biologically, what's happening and what's going on in your brain when you're actually procrastinating. So it's pretty logical for us to assume that the brain does what it's supposed to do, right? So it's trying to move ourselves away from discomfort. So it's just a protective mechanism. It's nothing more than that, okay? And luckily for us, there's a tool that we can use to break that cycle and to turn that around and to do the stuff that really matters and the stuff that is carrying a lot of weight, which has a lot of purpose and meaning to it for you. So that you, as a high achiever and peak performer, doesn't, sustain or maintain yourself within that loop. Because when you are in that loop chronically over time, peak performance will be impossible. And the reason for that is, as we just spoke about, it's the capacity of the brain to actually peak perform in the front of your brain. It's almost impossible when it's degenerated or it's just inhibited for a period of time. So that is why it could be detrimental for a high achiever and peak performer to actually procrastinate in the first place. So I have seen whole careers and elite athletes that have been destroyed due to that. Entrepreneurs and CEOs, you name it. It just pretty much destroys lives when we're talking about goal achieving and to having success and to actually get what you want in life. So buckle up, because in this video I'm gonna show you exactly what's going on in your brain when you procrastinate. I also gonna show you exactly why standard productivity advice do not work, and I'm gonna show you the exact biology approach and tool we can use to break this today permanently. So let's start to talk about dopamine. So dopamine, this is what I call the dopamine trap. So many people think that dopamine is more of a pleasure chemical, but it's actually not. It's more a anticipation chemical, where the brain is always calculating the amount of effort versus the reward, right? Is it worth it? And it's that calculation of the anticipation that is really, really important, and many people today have a really hard time with that because the dopamine reward system, which is about anticipation and to have patience, is heavily decreased right now in society in general, right? So that is why this is so important here. So we need to understand that the brain is getting dopamine before and prior the reward itself. So if we take high value work, for example, that you have a really important things to do, right? It requires a lot of effort and probably a pretty insecure way or a delayed uncertain reward, right? That is the peak performance, the deep work, so to speak. Every high achiever is doing this very good, okay? But checking your phone or some of that sort, talking to a friend at work will increase your dopamine level, and it's pretty low effort, right? So if you do that all the time, the brain also learns that if I'm doing low effort tasks and that is a lot of dopamine and it feels good, let's keep doing that. And that is one of the reasons why procrastination destroys peak performance, because peak performance requires a lot of effort and uncertain outcome, and the ability to take risk and to work hard with not knowing sometimes if it's gonna play out well or not. When we're talking about these, quick hits that is so famous in talking about, we can see that your dopamine system do not really care about your goal. It just cares about the path of least resistance, right? So this means that the more you are getting that neural pathway stronger with the path of least resistance, the harder for you it's going to be to get the real and hard work done. When you reinforce the pathway of getting each task or the work harder to do next time, and it's getting harder and harder to do, this is what research is called dopamine dysregulation. And in high achievers and peak performers, it's actually even a bigger problem, because the more successful or the higher standard you have, or the more responsibility you have, or the more popular you will get, or the more elite you get towards, the pretty much the resistance and the value or the weight of the tasks and the work itself is getting higher, and the stakes is getting higher. And that is also why if you do not have a good regulation of dopamine, it's going to be really hard for you to doing the more harder and harder work that is required for elite peak performance. Now layer into that the stress hormone cortisol, right? So cortisol is an interesting hormone because it has a lot of different functions, and one of them is to maintain energy and to provide energy to different cells in the body. So it's really important that we have cortisol. Without that, it's impossible to peak perform anyway. So it's not bad when it's regulated, but when it's not, and we will talk about that as well, it's going to be a catastrophe. And especially when you're adding that towards the dopamine dysregulation, it's going to be very hard for anyone to peak perform. Elite athletes and top executives and so on and so forth, world-class performers, all operate with optimized cortisol levels. And Pretty much you can say that cortisol levels is obviously very dependent on sleep and recovery as well, but it's very high in the morning and it will be, lower and lower towards the evening and towards sleep in optimal cases, right? And when you have that, you have a good focus, you have a good emotional control, and your cognitive ability to do things increased tenfolds. And of course, if it's dysregulated, it's the opposite way around, right? But chronic procrastination actually destroys that cortisol rhythm. So every time you do a high priority task and you avoid doing that, the thread is still there. So the brain is not calm. So it's still there. So it just amplifies. So cortisol stays elevated over time. So the more tasks you avoid doing, instead of what you might think that the stress hormone is actually decreasing, the thread is still present because you know that you're supposed to do that, right? This will be detrimental because chronically elevated cortisol does 3 things that are really catastrophic for the brain. And these are, first, it suppresses the prefrontal cortex that has to do with long-term thinking and really good decision making. Number 2, it disrupts your sleep patterns, and especially the REM sleep, which is your deep sleep, and the most important parts of the sleep when the brain is repairing itself and healing in many, many ways. And number 3, procrastination is not just any productivity problem. It's so much bigger when you're doing this over time. It's gonna impact you all the way in the cellular level, and even research shows that the risk for increase of chronic diseases, heart and vascular diseases, as well as cancer, do increase when you have chronically paced cortisol in your body for a very long time, which is exactly what procrastination does. So there you have it. Now you have the full picture, which is that a high stakes or a risk of some sort triggers your amygdala, so the fear center, right? And the fear center activates cortisol, which is the stress hormone, so the cortisol is increasing, as well as the dopamine is put down. This, of course, makes you trying to avoid it due to that, and you get a brief dopamine for the avoidance itself. And you procrastinate and do things so the brain learn itself that if you avoid things, good things will follow in terms of dopamine. So this is called the avoidance loop. And of course, it's very logical when you now know exactly what's going on there biologically and also physically as well. When you do this over and over again, this is called the procrastination loop, right? And the reason that willpower and discipline fails here every single time is because willpower itself pretty much is happening in the prefrontal cortex, which is shut down, right? So when you try to push through things and you just, working harder of that sort, so a lot of volume, a lot of tasks, and a lot of doing stuff, this means that you really are trying to putting out the fire with a tool that has created the fire. Obviously, this is not good. So this is the reason why productivity things like the Pomodoro technique and of that sort do not work, because people is treating procrastination as a time management issue when it's really a biological dysregulated thing going on there, right? So it's driven by biology and has nothing to do with you being productive or not. So you cannot discipline your way through a dysregulated system. And as I just said before, that a lot of people and high achievers and peak performers that we're working with is trying to push themselves through this loop. And the only thing they are doing is that they are getting more cortisol, and they are actually enhancing this loop and getting it stronger and getting the neural networks that has to do with procrastination even harder to break, instead of just see it as a dysregulated nervous system and regulate that first so that they can implement the other things there. So what actually do work? The answer is that it must be a biology-driven first intervention, right? Not any sort of productivity hacks, and no motivation is gonna solve this. So we need to regulate before we execute. That is the thing we're doing here. I'm gonna show you that right now. There's 3 really simple intervention that you just need to implement, and it's not taking a long time at all. You can do this in 2 minutes, and you can be right on the execution with a lot better physiology and neurology in order for you not to procrastinate. So the first intervention is what is called the physiological sigh, and it's very easy to do, and it have been shown and through research, and also Andrew Huberman, which is a neuroscientist, did a lot of great work as well with just proving that this is the fastest way for you to actually getting the prefrontal cortex and the front of the brain active again, so you can execute right away. So you just take 2 sighs in your nose. The first one is a little bit shorter, and the second one is a little bit longer. So, and you just breathe out in your mouth or from your mouth. And you do this, and it takes around 11 to 14 seconds, according to research, for the stress response from the sacs of your lung to actually release and to have a more stable balance between carbon oxide and oxygen, right? So it's a really fast way for you to physiologically kick the brain towards the non-procrastinating and the execution path right away, so that the cortisol level will drop, and the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the calm system in the body, will be active very fast, and your prefrontal cortex will be online again. This takes around 11 to 14 seconds. So it's a really fast way for you to get going as fast as possible. That brings us to number 2. Now we have regulated the nervous system, and before we're doing the execution itself and the task itself, we're just gonna have the dopamine level up to really good levels as well, because the dopamine levels is still flat here, even though we have regulated the prefrontal cortex and the brain. So what I want you to do is that in just 60 or 90 seconds, I want you to visualize the work itself, or the effort itself doing the work. This is important because a lot of visualization techniques learn that you should visualize the goal and the reward itself, and you succeed and all that. The problem with that is that the visualization will trigger dopamine in its connection with the reward, and we don't want that, do we? Right? Because of the reason that we talked about before. So I want you to just in 60 or 90 seconds just quickly visualize, close your eyes, or what do you want, how do you do it? It doesn't matter. Just visualize the effort itself and the process when you're doing the hard work before you're doing the hard work. This will trigger the anticipation loop, which is, and it's gonna be connected to the dopamine level, so you can have that in a sustainable, really good level, and to delay the gratification, so to speak. Why I think this is so critical, and why I just like the dopamine priming so very much, is because the outcome visualization activates the reward circuitry prematurely and kills execution drive. So here's how it works. In just 60 or 90 seconds, you visualizing, and you visualize not the outcome and the reward itself, but the process. So the hard work, the brain is working, or if you are an athlete, you just visualize the training, the hard training session itself, the call that is very hard to do, the meeting, not the revenue, right? So not the outcome. The good thing with this, because it's so critical, because outcome visualization actually triggers and activates reward circuitry prematurely and actually kills the execution drive, right? So process visualization instead activates the dopamine circuitry and anticipation we talked about before, response for the work itself. A bonus here is that there's also a second component here to that. What I want you to do is, before you just start the task or to execute, just in the end of the visualization, you just say loud to yourself that I choose to do this because it matters to me. Not I must or I can or I think or any of that sort. So I choose to do this because it matters to me. What that is doing is that it's driving a neurochemical pathway in the brain, which is the environment you're working in, and the effort itself as something that is really, really important and it matters to you, and that is a necessity in doing as well. So it activates the prefrontal cortex and reframes the tasks from threat to agency. Intervention number 3 is about anchoring your cortisol rhythm, and it's really easy to do. So the third intervention here is more structural by that sense. So remember what we talked about before. Cortisol is following a rhythm, right? As a lot of things in the body is doing. So that's why we have the circadian cycles and other cycles as well. Cortisol is at its peak around 30 to 40 minutes upon awakening, right? Then it will taper down during the day. If you can just protect your first 90 minutes, 30 or 40 minutes after awakening, or if you're exercising in the morning, which is also a good cortisol, it's actually gonna lengthening the cortisol rhythm a bit. As soon as you have a good amount of energy in the morning or whenever you wake up, right? If you're a night person, it's gonna be a little bit later and so on, but you get the deal. If you can protect the first 90 minutes and do the deep work there, you will be really, really good off when it's about procrastinating. So you can have the deep work and the important stuff there, the ones that you need to prioritize, and you can have all the emails and the meeting and the communication with other people in the afternoon. If you can hold that as much as you can, you're going to be way better off when we're talking about the cortisol rhythm, because it has to do with procrastination as well. And this is not, I just want to amplify that this is not some sort of time management hack here. So we want you to work with the biology, and when you do that, you have what it takes to actually have sustainable peak performance. And sustainable peak performance is what gets things done over time, instead of just doing, you can see all over in society people that is just coming a year or two and then they are just burned out and they're just gone, or losing interest or motivation. So it's a long game here, right? So we want to stay on the top, and we want to get our skill acquisition better and better and better each year that is happening. And this works in every domain also as well, not only work or in sport, but also in other areas in life. The fourth intervention here will target the avoidance loop itself, right? So when you feel some sort of pull to avoid, your brain will find a reason, right? And you will feel it, right? Because your brain is trying to protect you, as we said. And that looks like a pretty negative self-talk, or the inner critic, or the decision making between two voices in our head, right? So the brain is trying to come up for a reason for you not to doing it. That is how you procrastinate. So it's not the right time, or I need to do this instead, or I need more information before I can do this, and so on and so forth, right? So let me just finish this first. And yeah, you probably have heard 1,000 of these sort of manipulative conclusions that the brain is doing, right? So these are not logical conclusions. So they are cortisol-driven threat responses wearing the costume of rational thought in you. And that's really, really important for you to know that. The pattern interruption is really simple and genius itself, and really, really logical. So what you will do at first is that you will name it loudly. So you can just say that this is me avoiding, right? This is avoidance. So you just say that, and because you say that, you have brought up the thought into the prefrontal cortex in the front of your brain, and therefore actually have, broken the cycle. The second part of that is that you applying the 2-minute rule, or the 2-minute anchor. The 2-minute anchor is that you're just doing the hard thing in 2 minutes, and then just walk away. So when you do these two together, you're saying that this is me avoiding, and you do the task in 2 minutes. That means that you are interrupting the cycle. And obviously 2 minutes will be 3, 4, 5, and so on and so forth. And you will be off doing things way faster than you might think. So you don't need to perform it well. You don't need to finish the task. You just need to start, because the initiation is where the most of the resistance is. And as soon as you have, keep going and you're on the fly, once you are in motion, your neurochemicals and your biology will shift as well. To summarize, 4 interventions, it's 11 seconds of regulation, 60 seconds of process visualization, and 90 minutes of cortisol protection, and a single phrase to break the avoidance loop. So this is the biology first framework for you, and it works because it doesn't ask you to be stronger than your biology. It's just asking you to use your biology to your advantage. So I want to leave you here with one final reframing for you. And that is because information without identity change is pretty much just entertainment, right? So you came into this video and you probably believed that you were lazy, or you had evidence that maybe you didn't want it enough, and it wasn't important for you enough, or that you are weak. And I just want to say to you that that is not the case here. You have just hijacked your biology. That's it. We all have the capacity to just do this to peak perform in our lives. This is your new identity. So you are not failing or falling off, or being some, awkward person that is not figuring things out when everyone else is doing that, and so on and so forth. So you can just kickstart this right away. You were pretty much just running outdated biological software with the wrong settings. That's pretty much what you did, right? So the amygdala and the fear center was active and kept pulling you away from hard work. It was doing its job. It was protecting you. No big deal. And the brain didn't knew the difference between physical harm and actually high stake or high value with good weight tasks that is really leading to success in the long run. It just hadn't the capacity to distinguish from the two. And now you do. So this will change everything for you. because now, from this moment forward, when you feel the pull of avoidance, you won't shame yourself, right, into some sort of action or trying to push through. You won't white knuckle through things. You will regulate, you prime, and you protect your biology, right? So you break the loop and you'll use your biology to your advantage, because this is what peak performers doing on a daily basis. And you can do so now as well. Very, very easy to do. It's just to put it in the system and get you going. So now I have a challenge for you. Your assignment here now, because this will drive change. It's not just entertainment, it's real transformation. So the assignment for the next 24 hours is to just pick one high stake task. And you do that in the morning or prior to your awakening, or if you're exercising in the morning, just after that. And before you touch it, you just do the physiological sigh twice, and you do the 60 seconds process visualization, and then say the word "I choose this because it matters," and then start in 2 minutes. Okay? That's it. You don't have to optimize it. You don't have to prepare more than that. And just run the protocol and see what happens and how it will drive change. And if you do this, and I can guarantee that you will have results that will blow your mind if you're struggling with procrastination. And when you run the protocol, you can also see what happens in your body. And the moment of you having a direct experience of that, that's worth way more than just this amount of theory that we are going through in this video. If this landed for you and you really experience that something is really shifting in how you understand yourself as a peak performer, and you have a great benefit of this, please drop a comment below with the word "regulate." And that's how I know that this is working and it's reaching the right people. And also it tells me that I can produce and go deeper into this topic and to get even more into the peak performance from that lens, so to speak. If you want the next layer, I'm going to show you how to optimize your sleep architecture to rebuild your cortisol rhythms, to build that from the ground up so that you can recover correctly, because in peak performance the recovery is even more important than the work itself when it's regard to consolidation, memory, skill acquisition, and to peak you into the next level. So thank you guys, and please subscribe if you haven't. So this channel exists primarily just for one reason, and it is to give peak performers and high achievers the biological, the psychological, and the mentally and the physiological advantage to perform, and the edge that most performance content never mention. That's what we do here. That's Elevate State, and it's primal. Thank you.